All right. Wow. I was hoping there'd be a lot less of you. Because I'm actually fairly nervous because this is a topic that doesn't fall completely under the realm of master control. My name's Sam McClendon. I'm a technical support engineer and the tech support trainer. So anyone who calls tech support and talks with one of the engineers there's a good chance that I'm going to train them in the software. So the topic for today is disaster recovery, strategies and best practices. But to start with, I'd like to find out how many of you are IT people for your companies? How many of you are dot controller quality? All right. So they told me this was supposed to be an intermediate level class or session. But when it comes to something like disaster recovery and obviously what part of the business that you belong in, intermediate can kind of be a moving target. All right. So I've got some slides here to go over disaster recovery policy, some of the things to look for, how to determine your critical systems. A little section in the middle has to do with disaster recovery and master control specifically. But what I'm hoping is that towards the end of the session, for about the last 10 or 15 minutes, we'll be able to open up for just discussion and questions. Okay. A lot of the stuff that I'll be talking about is very general, because when it comes to disaster recovery, there's a lot of things that are company specific, right? Your company might have specific internal policies or specific software that your company uses that other companies don't that may change the way your disaster recovery policy looks compared to another customer. Okay. So to start with, what is disaster recovery? All right, the prime directive. I'm a geek and I'm going to show it off right now. So disaster recovery is the ability of an organization to provide critical IT capabilities and services after it is disrupted. Okay? It is also the recovery of disrupted technological services to ensure critical business functions. DRP is part of a larger business continuity plan, but it is the only part that is typically dependent on IT itself. Okay. DCP, or the business continuity plan, is in regards to business operations, and DRP is in regards to the technological aspect. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm very nervous right now because I got people back there who are probably planning on heckling me afterwards. So.
We'll back you up.
All right. The overall planning methodology for disaster recovery is listed here. I'm told that these slides will be available probably a week and a half after the summit is over with. So we won't go through these step by step because this is supposed to be an intermediate level session. Okay. But if you have any questions about any of these, you can ask once the slides are done. Okay. Right. Identifying critical systems. This is probably one of the most important things when setting up your DRP. Okay, because your company has a lot of moving parts inside of it. Okay. This is required in order to determine how your components connect to each other and what is required to bring those systems back up again. Okay, this requires creating an inventory of your hardware and software, all your business applications, and then constructing a architecture that everyone can kind of understand, showing how everything connects together. All right. It's also important for you to determine your recovery time objectives and your recovery points. With this information up here, you should also be able to set your risk level for each individual system so you can prioritize what systems need to be brought up first. All right. The next slide will talk about the 3 different strategic measures for your disaster recovery process and planning. So the first is preventative measures. All right. How can you prevent a major failure? All right. One thing so I've been with tech support for 8 years, and invariably it seems every 3 years tech support gets a rash of calls from customers that have had a server fail. Okay, and just like everything else, they all happen in threes, right? So 3 customers will call in because they've had a server fail because a hard drive failed or because the memory failed. Okay, so it's one of the most important things for IT people is to recognize and be aware of your equipment lifespan. How long have you been running a particular hard drive? How long have you been running a particular server? Because if you can be cognizant of when those lifespans are about to expire, okay, you can prevent server failures by preemptively replacing that equipment. All right. Detective measures. What proactive methods can you put into place to try to prevent a disaster, prevent a catastrophic failure in your equipment? Okay. There are software monitoring items that you can purchase and implement. Is it going to be a manual process? Okay, are you going to task like your IT folks to periodically go in and check the health of your software? Okay, is this the Windows tools like disk defragmentation, items like that? Okay. Corrective measures. These are items that you put in place or think about when something has actually failed. All right. So this is the process of recovering from that failure. And one of the most important things to be aware of is what internal and external resources are required for each individual component to bring it back to life. All right. So if your IT department is small enough that you purchase everything from Dell, you have to be aware of how long it will take Dell to send you a replacement. Right. So if you're relying on an external source for your hardware requirements, you have to be aware of how long that's going to take, right? And how much it's going to cost, right? Because overnighting a 50-pound server can be quite costly if it's coming from across country. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, what is master control's involvement? So this is the little section in the middle where we talk about master control and specifically disaster recovery for master control. Okay. Is it Nareem? Yeah. So Nareem asked me when I walked in if there was going to be a plan for something in master control to directly interface with a disaster recovery program. I think we've looked at it in the past, but because of the variety of software, the variety of hardware that's available, individual customers' internal policies, I don't expect master control to actually implement anything on its own. We're still going to rely on your company's policies and procedures to protect your information and your data. Okay? So on that note, the 2 critical components of master control, there's my starship, showing off my nerdiness again. Okay, the first one is your database. Okay, your master control database, don't laugh, Tyler. The master control database contains all the data, the directory pointers, and your configuration for master control. If you lose your database, we cannot recover it. Okay? The second component is your EFP. And I'm sure any of you who've called into tech support have heard us mention the EFP, even though you may not actually know what it stands for. Okay? EFP stands for electronic file path. And it is the file storage location where every file that you load into master control is kept. All right? So again, like the database, if you lose your EFP or portions of your EFP, we cannot recover those. Okay? Beyond those 2 components, every other part of master control can be reinstalled and reconfigured. Okay? So, what you back up is dependent on your backup process. Okay, so I've listed in general terms the 3 different types of backups that customers typically do. We have virtual environments, drive imaging, and folder backups. Okay, with virtual environments, the interface required from master control is minimal. Typically, if a virtual goes down, you spin up a new one and replace it, right? And it's already going to be pre-configured. The name of the server is going to remain the same, so you're not going to have to change any DNS settings, any routing settings on the back end. You're just going to spin it up, and in theory, it should just come right online and start working. Okay? Drive images are a bit different, where virtual includes a snapshot of everything, including the operating system and all software that's installed, registry and IP addresses, all that. Drive images are just a picture of the drive. Okay. Master Control's involvement, if your backup policy is a drive image, is a bit heavier because it may require that we reinstall and reconfigure some components of the software. Okay. The last type of backup that some customers use is a folder backup. So in other words, all they're doing is they're setting up and flagging specific folders on the hard drive to be backed up to tape or disk. Okay. This type of backup involves the most amount of integration with Master Control. Okay, because it means that your IT group has to completely reinstall and set up a brand new server. They copy those files back over, and then Master Control has to completely reinstall everything and then configure it all to point to the appropriate folders that you've from your backup. Okay? So, the backup types, virtual environments, the strengths, okay? It's an easy spin up. It's a pre-configured environment, and there's typically no physical replacement involved unless there's been a failure on your actual host. Okay? Everyone understand what that means? Okay. Weaknesses. This probably requires the largest amount of storage, right? Because essentially it's a snapshot of an entire operating system and computer. Okay, so you're looking at 50, 60 gigs worth of storage space required for every virtual. All right. In addition, it's typically an all or nothing, right? So either you spin up the whole thing or you don't. You cannot extract specific information from that virtual without actually bringing it online. Okay. Disk images, strengths. You can remount it on any hard drive. Okay, which means you can easily move data from one machine to another machine. Okay, so if you're just looking to upgrade your server with a larger hard drive, with the drive imaging, you just snapshot the old drive and you mount it on a larger disk. Okay. Weaknesses, again, is a storage space requirement. Plus, there's also a physical replacement involved, right? You have to have another hard drive to mount it on. Okay. For folder copies, the strength is storage space. Out of all the backup types that you can perform, this one requires the least amount of space. Okay, because essentially you're specifying which folders you want to store. Right, so you're not storing program files, you're not storing operating system files, all you're storing is your actual data. Okay? Plus, with folder copies, you can extract individual records. So let's say you don't have a hard drive completely fail, but you end up with sectors on your hard drive that are corrupted. Okay? With folder copies, you can actually go back and extract the corrupted files from an older backup and apply them to your original hard drive. Okay? So, the weaknesses, however, is that it's slow. Okay? It takes a while, however long Windows says it takes to copy, which we all know that that's not 100% accurate, right? You might copy 5 gigs over and Windows tells you it's going to take 2 hours, and it actually only takes you 15. It's slow. Restoring backups from a folder copy like this takes time. Okay? It also requires, again, a reinstallation of everything, right? So IT is responsible for reinstalling the operating system. The Master Control is going to be responsible for reinstalling the software and reconfiguring it. Okay, and then plugging in your EFP and your database back into the new server. All right. Okay, one of the big questions that we sometimes get from customers who are trying to develop their DRP is, what level of risk do we accept? Right? And unfortunately, that's not a question tech support can specifically answer for you. Okay, so there are things you have to consider when you're determining how much risk you're willing to take. Okay? The first one is, what processes and applications have the greatest impact on your business? Okay? So if Master Control is integral to your day-to-day operations, then Master Control would have to be one of the first programs you spin back up to get back on your feet, should there be a catastrophic failure on your system. Okay? If you're a manufacturing company and you've got a manufacturing program that is critical to your business function, then that may rate higher than Master Control. Okay? But you have to determine every process and every application in your business and how it ranks in the criticality of running your business. Okay? How many users are going to be affected? Right? If you're a small company or Master Control is only being utilized by a handful of people, that may push Master Control further down on your priority list, as opposed to another piece of software that's being used by 80% of your company. Okay? How much data are you willing to lose? This is usually the big one when it comes to Master Control, because this particular parameter will determine how frequently you have to run backups on your system. Okay? Beyond this, this particular determination, okay, this decision will determine all your processes that your emergency processes that you put into place while Master Control is down. Okay? Or the process you put into place to mitigate the risk. Okay? So if you determine that you're willing to lose 8 business hours of data, that is an acceptable risk to your particular company, then you have to build all your processes around that decision, right? So 1 business day, you have to make sure that your users, your power users, are saving the files they're loading into the system for at least 1 day. That way, if the system does go down and you restore to a backup that's 1 business day old, you still have those documents available somewhere on the network to put back into the system. All right. What's the resource impact of maintaining certain backups? Okay. Now, obviously, if you're doing virtual environments, you're talking about a lot of storage space, right? You're talking about 60 to 100 gig images that you have to store somewhere. Okay. If you're talking about folder or disk imaging, right? Whenever that drive is being backed up, you're going to see a performance hit probably on the server, right? So if you do it in the middle of the day, if you're doing a backup every 4 hours, the site is probably going to slow down while that backup's running. Okay? But there are all kinds of resource considerations that you're going to have to think of in determining what resource, the amount of resources you're willing to dedicate to back up your software more frequently. Okay? And of course, the big question that all the executives usually want to know is how much is it going to cost? Right? How much money are we going to lose? Right? I'm seeing a lot of really sleepy people out there, so maybe I'll start asking people to read off his slides. Okay, mitigating the risk. Tyler, you want to read my subtitle? All right, offline policies. When the applications are down, you have to make sure that your users know the processes that they have to follow when they can't access a piece of software. All right? So if you're a manufacturing company and you have work instructions that your people on the floor have to follow, you have to ensure that there's a policy in place and that those floor technicians or whoever they are know how to follow it. Is there a physical printout of their work instruction? If so, where is it at? Okay? How frequently do you ensure that that work instruction is up to date? All right. If it's Master Control, so if we're talking about SOPs and document control, what policies do you have in place or what procedures do you have in place if Master Control is down for allowing people to continue to work on those documents? Do they do it on a network share? Do you have a backup system? Is it all paper? Right? Are you still in the pen and paper stage? Okay, offline. Because on top of that, you have to have policies for when Master comes back up and how do we get this into the system? Okay. Don't forget to review your policies on a frequent and regular basis. This is one thing that, despite the number of customers I talk to, that have a failure like this always surprises me when they set up their policy 5 years ago and they haven't tested it since, right? Or they haven't reviewed it since. Okay? Your disaster recovery policy needs to be reviewed regularly. It needs to be tested regularly. Every time there's a change in your applications, in your hardware, okay, you need to be pulling out your disaster recovery policy and checking to see if you need to make adjustments to anything. All right? There's probably nothing worse than if you have to order a server from Dell and then last year you switched to HP and their shipping times are different. And you haven't taken that into consideration with your disaster recovery. Okay, because we all know that HP ships slower than Dell. I'm kidding. I'm dying up here. No one thinks I'm funny. Don't be afraid to update your policies to best reflect changes in your business practice. All right? Your disaster recovery policy is a living entity in your system. Okay, you can't neglect it because otherwise it will cost you money in the end. Okay? The human factor. What good is a policy if you don't have your employees buy in? Right? If you put a policy in place for when master control is down, but your power users don't follow it, that policy is worthless. Right? You lose money, you lose man hours, you lose data. Okay? So it is important that you get your employees to buy in and that you do consistent and frequent training on those policies to make sure that they do not forget it. Because you may go 4 years without a failure. Okay? But in those 4 years, you should have maintained a reoccurring training for all your disaster recovery processes. Okay? Again, it may seem like a little thing, but in the end, it actually matters. Okay? And then, of course, my last statement right here, which I've already said multiple times, test, test, test. Always test your backup policy. Okay, your disaster recovery policy. All right, why is communication important in your disaster recovery plan? Anyone? Bueller? The only reason I said that is because most of us look like we're old enough to know that reference. All right, so DRP is about business, right? It's going to save your business money if you have an effective and efficient disaster recovery plan in place. Okay? It means that when a server fails, you'll be able to get your business back on its feet faster. Okay? The subsequent policies that follow it will ensure that you don't lose work, okay? That you don't lose critical data. Changes in your business processes and the resources that are available can change your DRP. But your IT people may not know when something changes on another side of the business, right? So if dot control changes the policy, it's important that dot control communicates that to IT because they may have to change a policy on their side or they may have to provide feedback to dot control to let them know whether or not it's possible. Okay? And of course, I've already said this, DRP is a living system. Okay, it's a living entity inside your business. Don't neglect it. All right, this is the typical disaster recovery plan life cycle. Okay, and as you can see, it's a circle because circles don't have a start and they don't have an end. Right? You're writing, you're testing, you're evaluating, you're revising constantly. All right. Okay, now we're going to talk about actually testing. All right, I'm on track because like I said, I'm hoping for time at the end so people can ask questions and we can actually hold a discussion. All right, so there's different kinds of testing that you can perform on your DRP. The first is paper tests. Paper tests are designed to essentially build the framework of your process, whatever process it might be. Okay, you have your committee in place, they are pointing out different items and you are building the framework for your disaster recovery. Okay, it covers major points of recovery and failure. Okay, that's pretty much all it does. Okay, it initiates your framework. You point out all the major parts where it could fail, okay, or the important recovery points. Beyond the paper test, you have your walkthrough test. This is where you're going to actually have subject matter experts, okay, who are going to be involved in this process to continue fleshing out what you've developed in your paper tests, okay? These folks are going to flesh out the process by providing more insight on how the software actually works or how the hardware actually connects together, okay? Subject matter experts are going to be involved in this so they can provide their feedback on how everything functions, okay? Simulations. These are simulation tests are where you're actually going to take your process and you're actually going to execute it virtually. Okay? You may not actually be taking servers down at this point. You may not be spinning up virtuals, but you're taking the process you've lined out here in your walkthrough and you're actually stepping through it one step at a time with the people who are actually going to be executing it. Okay? So they can provide feedback on that particular step, right? So they may tell you it's not going to take 5 minutes, it's going to take us 15 minutes, right? Because they're in the trenches. They're the ones who actually understand how everything functions because they're in it every single day, right? So like, I'm sure if I was to ask some of the IT people in here master control questions, they'd probably look at me a little blank and defer to their dot control people. Right? Because obviously your IT people don't understand how master control works, right? The simulation test will give you an idea of how well the procedure is going to work. Okay? It's going to pick out all the little things that may have been missed when you were looking at the process at a higher level. Okay? After simulation testing, you're going to do what's called a parallel test. Parallel tests are you're not actually bringing down your production environment, but you are setting up a mirror environment for testing and development. Okay, so you would spin up test servers and environments to see how well they come online. Okay, this might be on a subdomain, it might be on your primary domain. It's up to you. Okay, but a parallel test is actually going to be the first time you're going to test your actual backup policy, your backup procedure, what type of backup you're running, how fast is it going to take you to do that folder copy. How fast is it going to take to copy that virtual environment to another host? Okay. Once you are confident in your plan so far, then you would do a cutover. Okay, and this is actually going to be the highest risk test you're going to do because you're actually going to be testing it. You might actually take one of your servers offline so you can spin up another server and see how quickly you can replace it. Okay. This test will show all the minutia problems that will come up in your process. Okay? If you have a DNS problem, okay, it's probably going to show up here rather than in your parallel test. Because in your parallel test, you're probably running on a completely different domain with a completely different set of IP addresses and server names. Okay? So, but your cutover test is going to actually test your process to see if it works. Okay. The first 3 tests up here are the ones you'll probably do most frequently throughout the year. Right? A paper test is easy. You get a new server, you get a new piece of software. It's easy enough to break out a paper test, review the overall major points, and see if anything needs to be adjusted. Okay? If something does need to be adjusted, then you would then step through these 2 processes right here. Okay? Your parallel tests and your cutover tests are going to be performed less frequently because they actually have a greater impact on your business, right? To do a parallel test, you're going to have to assign resources to that test, right? So you're going to have to pull people, pull IT people, you're going to have to pull dot control people in order to do it. And of course, your cutover test is going to have the highest impact. You're probably going to only want to do a cutover test if there's a major change to your policy. This test, you're probably only going to do at that stage, right? Because you're actually talking about impacting your production environments. Okay, does that make sense?
Make sure you schedule that.
Oh yeah, I mean obviously if master control fails, okay, if the server with master control on it fails, the first thing you should do is contact tech support so we can open up a ticket. Okay, even if you have not actually gone in and look to see what the impact of that failure is, notify tech support so we can get an incident open, and we're ready to begin assigning resources to help you if necessary. Okay, like scheduling with the install team. Okay, if they have to reinstall a piece of software. Okay, but Master Tech Support, we're here to assist you if anything like this ever happens to one of your Master Control environments. So please don't hesitate to call and open up an incident. All right, best practices. I want time to take questions, so I'm going to throw these up here. Dedicated and empowered staff, really important. All right, and if you'll notice, these are actually all very general items, right? These aren't specific to any one industry or one type of customer. Division of responsibility, independent planning, staffing, a control environment for your parallel testing is very important, okay? And then if you're looking at purchasing a program to help you with your disaster recovery, try it first before you buy it. Find a program that's going to fit your process and is not going to require you to change what you've already planned, okay, very much. All right? And of course, test, because I can't stress that enough. I've talked to so many customers who they have a server fail, they instigate their disaster recovery plan, something bombs out, they call us, and they're like, yeah, we put this plan in place, but we never tested it. We didn't think anything would go wrong. Okay? And then suddenly, instead of being down for 2 days or 3 days, they're now down for a week. All right? So again, that's why I kept posting this and putting this in my slides. Test. That is the most important thing about your DRP. Okay? All right. Discussion time. Any questions? Yes.
So Master Control is hosting our site.
Yep.
How do we develop a disaster recovery plan? Do we get a copy of what your plan is and intermingle it with ours? Or how would we kind of do a synergy between the two? Because basically it's in your hands. If it goes down, we can't do anything.
Right. So, I mean, Chad's sitting back there. I saw him sneak in. I don't know what information Cloud Services provides as far as the recovery plan goes, but I know that all of your environments are virtual.
Yep.
Right. So they should, unless there's a failure on the host, we should be able to spin those back up fairly quickly. So when it comes to DRP for you, your primary consideration are the processes beyond master control, right? So if we tell you that the longest you should be down is 48 hours, then you would develop your processes for, well, what do we do when master control is down, right? We do backups every night. Every 8 hours. Okay. Okay. So knowing that, you would probably want to put a procedure in place where your users are storing the documents they load in a master control onto a network drive somewhere, and you clear that out every day. Right.
So during an audit, we have the disaster recovery plan. They're reviewing it, and they see this master control, and they go, okay, so what's your disaster recovery for that? Can I get a copy of Master Control's plan? I mean, because that's what they're going to ask, because it's really,
right.
you know.
Yeah, no, it's important. I mean, over 8 years and the number of customers I've talked to who have had failures,
right.
It is really important. But I probably have to defer to Chad.
We're currently in the process of making a plan together.
Okay.
Right now we're on backup solutions, so it's restoring everything.
Right. Okay. Okay, cool.
Yes.
We are hosted also, so basically the same question. But has it ever happened where the master control server has gone down?
Hosted environment, has it ever happened that we lost?
We have not had any system-wide downtime.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah, so, I mean, I've never heard of a failure on any one of our hosts at that level.
We've had,
So.
our biggest downtime that I can remember in the past couple
15 minutes. Okay.
That's why we do our maintenance. That's what's-
I think the more probably I've heard with this is like their internal intranet will go down and then we'll have internet access. And so the also obviously that provides a problem there, so we need to make sure you're structured around that.
So that would be, the key on, that would be the recovery, the disaster. We need to focus, we have to maintain internet connectivity.
And there's also products like CAPS.
Yes.
Is there any correlation between the recovery point objectives for the database versus the electronic file path, and then even backing up the PDF server?
The PDF server is not required. There's nothing on the PDF server that needs to be backed up. There's nothing that's permanently stored there. So, and as far as your EFP and your database, they should be backed up at the same time to maintain consistency between the two copies.
So it'd just be a risk analysis on how much data we want to lose between maybe our database versus our electronic file path. If we thought we had more process work going on in the database than we did on the electronic file path, then like right now we're doing transaction log backups every 10 minutes.
Okay.
Maybe overkill, but want to save as much as we can.
Right.
And then our electronic file path we're doing every 4 hours. So.
Yeah, I mean, if you were just using the process module, that's probably a good separation. Because for forms, it's all strictly database stuff until it gets published, in which case then there's an entry in the EFP. Yeah, so that's probably good.
Stuff like that, if you can see your change between your 4 hours and your database. You see a lot of changes in your database.
Yeah, how would we look at our changes for our computer
Creating snapshots or
It's actually a top priority. Okay, yeah,
Any other questions or unique situations you want an opinion on?
Parker Picard.
Picard. All right.
Right.
I'm more of a thinking man. Plus, I've met William Shatner. He's not that great of a guy. So that kind of killed Kirk for me. All right, so we've got 2 minutes. Don't forget to fill out the surveys. Don't be, fill out if you need a paper survey, they're here on the tables. Sean, what else? Oh, there's an electronic survey online that you'll also be able to fill out.
Same thing, though.
Yeah. And I do have business cards up here if you'd like to take one. If you have questions after the summit, you can feel free to email me about DRP.